Hi friends, how are you all doing? Today I am making a video about my reading plans for 2019, just to spice up your March booktube content with something a little different, or more accurately, something very late. So today I want to share with you 4 goals that I have for my reading in 2019 and 2 booktube related goals. But before we get into those, I actually want to start with, I guess, what would technically be like a 5th reading goal, which is simply that I want to read 100 books in 2019. Last year I read 64, and so I am feeling like 100 is going to be a bit of a stretch. But if you plot my reading from last year by like month by month, then there's really a strong trajectory that I read more and more as the year goes on. I suppose that graph would go like this for you guys. So even though it's a lot more than last year, I feel really good about it. So far this year, I've read 23 books, and that's been the last 2 months, so I'm definitely like hitting more than my average books per month necessary to read 100 books this year, but March has been slowing down, so we'll see if I can keep it up. And who knows what the second half of the year will bring. So anyway, that's just my tentative goal. Let's move on to my other goals. And the first one, which you guys might have picked up on from my last video, is that I have a list of books that I'm embarrassed I haven't read yet. And maybe this is something that's really relatable as a reader. Maybe it's something that's not, or that you think is a bad thing to have. It's not that I'm like truly deeply embarrassed I haven't read these books yet. It's just that they're books that I think that they are so common or popular or influential in the canon of modern or classic or Western literature, whatever it may be. Just a lot of ones that either for popular culture or in academic settings have come up enough times that I'm sick of not being familiar with them or being able to join in the conversation, etc. To share with you just a few from this list, there are 5 I've already read: The Odyssey, Brave New World, Uncle Tom's Cabin, The Secret Garden, and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've already read those so far in the 2 months since the year started, so I'm really proud of myself and the pace that I'm keeping with this list. A few others from my top 20 priority or so: 1984, Catcher in the Rye, Wuthering Heights, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, which I'm presently reading, a Dickens, a Steinbeck or Gaskell, The Hobbit, Beowulf, The Picture of Dorian Gray, Alice in Wonderland, Lord of the Flies, Little Women, The Lord of the Rings, and a Kurt Vonnegut. So that's not all of the books that are on my list, but that's sort of my top priority. If you want to know all of them, you can go over to my Goodreads and be friends with me there. There'll be a link in the description. And I do have a shelf that is my list of books I'm embarrassed I haven't read yet. I have a phase 1 and a phase 2. Right now I'm working on phase 1. So anyway, yeah, that's my number 1 goal. My second goal is to have read every book I own by the end of the year. I don't own a lot of books, so this is actually not a really huge goal for me, but I have accumulated a little bit of a stack. And part of the reason is because I don't know why I own these books. A few of them have been gifts. There is a very small handful which I have bought. A few of them are left over from college that they were recommended reading rather than required reading, and I didn't actually get around to them. Some of them I genuinely don't know why I own them. They just, either I somehow stole them off of a roommate at some point in the last few years. I just ended up with them and I don't know why. So I will show you the list. I have 14 books. This is all of them. You can pause the screen if you are really interested in what books they are. That's 14 books that I own that I haven't read yet, and by the end of the year I want to have either read them and have a meaningful reason to keep them, or else read them or DNF'd them and gotten rid of them. I personally don't find a lot of pleasure in owning books. It's just a personal thing. So my third goal is a little bit abstract, but I haven't figured out exactly how I want to qualify this or track it, but it's important for me to try harder to read books that are high on my anticipated list. And not necessarily anticipated as in they aren't published yet, but just books that I've been really excited to read. And the reason I say this is that if I look back on my 2018 reading, I found that there were a lot of times that I read what was accessible to me or what I happened to stumble across at the library or something like that, and instead didn't read the books that I actually had a deeper intuitive feeling that I would enjoy. And if I scan all of last year, I think that the only book that would fit into this category, actually, this is quite interesting. Maybe this is why I had this problem. There were two books at the beginning of 2018 that were really high on my radar, and I did read both of them. But the first one I read was The Nightingale, and it was my biggest disappointment of 2018. I think I gave it 1 star. I think it deserves 1 star. Not trying to pick a fight, it's an extremely popular book. I thought it was really horrible. And maybe that's why I was not inclined to read as many books from this list, because it took me all the way until December. I read Nightingale in January. It took me all the way until December to read a book that has been high on my lists of books I really want to read for 2 full years, slightly over 2 full years, which was A Gentleman in Moscow, which was my favorite read of the entire year. How interesting is that? Wow, I really wanted to read both those books, and one of them was my least favorite and the other one was my most favorite. So anyway, my point is I want to read more books from my highly anticipated list, because I think that I keep on sidestepping it for sort of middle ground books, and because I hate being disappointed when I have a book I'm really excited to read and then it lets me down. But I want to read more books from that list because I think that more of them are going to land on the side of A Gentleman in Moscow and not The Nightingale. My 4th and final goal for my reading plans, to read more outside of my genre comfort zone. Right now I would describe my genre comfort zone, or what I most often read, as literary fiction, nonfiction, middle grade, which is really surprising me. I had no idea I loved middle grade before like 2 months ago. And then perhaps historical fiction, but I'm really picky on that and pretty specific. And classics, I guess I should maybe say classics, though definitely defining that as modern classics, you know, from the 20th century. A lot of them have been from that time period that I've been reading recently. The genres that I really want to break into this year would be fantasy. I have The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings on my list. I also, like I just mentioned, read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but aside from that, I think that was possibly my first ever science fiction book. That seems really weird to me, but I can't think of any other ones, so I think it must have been the most, you know, directly and candidly fits the category of science fiction book that I've ever read. I also read a lot more poetry in 2018 than I'd ever read before. I do want to keep that up and make sure that I incorporate that into my reading list. For the most part, I do try to read a fairly broad amount of genres, but I think I could be a little bit more diverse, and I really like reading diversely. I don't think that I can pigeonhole my reading style quite yet. I still feel like I'm really kind of rediscovering it. I read a lot as a child or as a teenager, and then all through college for like 5-6 years I hardly read at all for pleasure, like literally hardly at all. And so now, and thanks to BookTube giving me like a plethora of books to read, I feel like I'm really rediscovering my reading taste, and that's really fun. So I'm just gonna continue with that. So last of all, I want to share with you my BookTube goals. I do have a few goals that I would like to push myself to incorporate. One, more art into this channel, which I've said that before, and I feel bad that I haven't done anything about that in the last 2 months. But I would like to incorporate more of that because I think that it's something unique that I have to offer. The second thing is that I want to do more individual reviews, and this is something that sort of really intimidates me. I think there are a lot of people that are more eloquent when it comes to talking about literature. I see the parallels in critiquing literature and critiquing fine arts, and I'm versed in this and like good at this and know how to critically approach art and its, you know, methodologies and the ways of analyzing it and creating arguments. And because I know how to do that, it shows to me how much I don't know how to do that with literature, which makes me nervous about making individual reviews. There are a lot of different ways to make reviews. I don't think that all of them have to be so critical, like, you know, academically critical. And I think that if I remind myself that, I'll be able to like ease down and just present my opinion. I love watching reviews. When people say that they're like the least favorite thing on BookTube, I don't understand exactly what they're talking about because I love them. I really like watching reviews. I like contributing to this community, and I'd like to be able to contribute that to this community because I think that it's a strong, fundamental video that our community stands on. Just reviews, actual reviews of books. Yeah, so there you go. There are at least 4 of my reading plan goals and 2 BookTube goals. I have a few more ambiguous kind of goals in my head, but those are the ones that are concrete and they're really important to me to work on. If you're particularly interested in any of these goals that I've mentioned and me like keeping you guys updated in other videos other than like an end of year video, then you can mention that too and I can make sure I incorporate that. Anyway, I have linked down below my Instagram as well as my Goodreads account. If you'd like to follow me there and keep up to date, I would love that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in a future video. Bye!